Okay, think about this for a second. You see an AI video of a former president getting arrested, it goes viral. Then, almost at the same time, the director of national intelligence is talking about a treasonous conspiracy.
Right.
And then, boom, a big late night show gets canceled. Plus, there's news about a former president's health. Oh, and a major airline gets grounded by an IT glitch.
Yeah, it sounds like just, random chaos, doesn't it? Just headlines flying around.
It's exactly like a total grab bag. But what if these aren't really separate things? What if they're all kind of connected symptoms of something bigger, something shaking things up globally?
That's exactly what we're aiming to do in this deep dive. For you, listening in, we want to pull apart those threads.
Yeah.
See how things happening inside the U.S., like how information gets twisted or how fragile our digital world is, how that stuff eats away at trust.
And ramps up the political divide.
Precisely. Ramps up polarization.
Yeah.
And then, crucially, how that doesn't just stay within the U.S., it spills over, causes these ripple effects around the world, hitting developing nations particularly hard. So yeah, this whole analysis is built right from the sources you gave us. We're here to help you find the most important nuggets, the key insights, and all of that.
Okay, let's definitely unpack this because I think there are some real moments buried in here. Let's start with maybe the most vivid example from the sources, how information itself is getting, well, weaponized, especially with AI.
Yeah, that's a big one.
The sources talk about Donald Trump posting that AI-generated video on Truth Social, the one showing President Obama supposedly being arrested by the FBI, and the caption was, "No one is above the law."
Right. And the really critical thing here isn't just, the shock value. It's what it represents. It's a pretty significant step up in using AI as a weapon in politics.
How so? Exactly.
What works to normalize things that just aren't real.
Yeah.
It makes it harder and harder for anyone, for the public, to know what's fact and what's fiction. And that's fundamental for people being able to vote based on reality. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's this dangerous idea called the liar's dividend. Think about it. If any damaging video or audio can just be waved away as, oh, that's just a deep fake, then what happens to real evidence?
It loses its power. People just dismiss it.
Exactly. Genuine accountability just sort of evaporates. It undermines the whole system of holding powerful people responsible. And we're seeing this tech arms race, too. The deepfake tools are getting better, spreading faster.
While the detection tools are trying to keep up.
Constantly playing catch-up, yeah. It creates this feeling of perpetual vulnerability, like we can never quite be sure.
That liar's dividend concept is genuinely chilling. So, okay, that's the digital manipulation side. But what about when official stories, narratives from the government itself get tangled up in all this distrust? I'm thinking about what the sources said about Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, her threatening criminal referrals, claiming overwhelming evidence that Obama officials manufactured and politicized intelligence back after the 2016 election.
To undermine Trump, yeah. Fueling that whole Russiagate hoax idea.
Right. So what does that do to the system?
Well, connecting this back, allegations like that, whether they turn out to be true or not, they just pour fuel on the fire of distrust and partisan division.
Yeah.
It gets deeper.
Okay.
And a key thing the sources point out is how declassification itself can become political. It stops being just about transparency, letting people see what happened.
And starts being about pushing a certain story.
Exactly. It's used to back up a partisan agenda.
Yeah.
And that directly hits the credibility of, say, the intelligence community, makes them look less impartial.
So you end up with these dueling official narratives.
Precisely. From opposing sides.
Yeah.
And each side just dismisses the other's claims as biased or fake. So where does that leave you, the public, trying to find objective truth? It's almost impossible.
It makes truth itself feel partisan.
It does. It entrenches it as a partisan idea.
Yeah.
Which, of course, just makes the polarization worse. And think about the implications these politically charged accusations can actually start real legal fights, investigations.
Eating up time and resources.
And polarizing everyone even further. It's a feedback loop, a really damaging one.
Wow. It's unsettling how easily that can happen. But is there a flip side? Like, if we question everything, do we risk undermining genuine transparency efforts too?
That's a fair point. Definite tension.
And how does this whole toxic soup, where facts are always up for debate, affect the media? What did you make of this Stephen Colbert show cancellation? The Late Show, ending by May 2026. CBS said it was about ad revenue dropping way down, costs going up.
Right. Those are the official reasons. Financial. But, the timing was suspicious, let's say.
How so?
It came just 3 days after Colbert went pretty hard criticizing Paramount, the parent company, right, over that $16 million settlement with Donald Trump. Colbert called it a big fat bribe, maybe linked to getting a merger approved.
Ooh, yeah, I remember that. And didn't some senators raise eyebrows too?
Yeah, Schiff and Warren publicly questioned the motives. And Trump himself was quite happy about the cancellation. So this whole situation really highlights that chilling effect idea we touched on.
Meaning other shows might get nervous.
Exactly. If a huge show gets cut, and there's even a whiff of political pressure or corporate maneuvering tied to politics, well, other outlets might just, self-censor, avoid controversial topics, less critical voices.
Because the corporate side, the money, the mergers needing government sign-off, gets tangled up with the political commentary.
Precisely. It exposes that vulnerability. How media independence can potentially be compromised when corporate interests and political pressures collide.
And this is happening while the media landscape is already changing so much, right? Local news disappearing.
Yeah, massive consolidation. Local news is struggling. More content seems aligned with specific ideologies. Plus, everyone's scattered, moving from regular TV to streaming, different apps.
Making it harder to find reliable, diverse information.
Much harder. And it makes people much more vulnerable to misinformation when the trustworthy sources shrink or the landscape gets so fragmented.
That's a really worrying picture for media freedom. Does it mean any outlet critical of powerful people is just inherently at risk now? How does that affect us just trying to figure out what's true?
It certainly raises the stakes.
Okay, so if the information we get is fragile, what about the systems we rely on every day? Like the digital stuff. That Alaska Airlines IT outage grounded everything for hours. How can one tech glitch cause such chaos?
Well, that incident is like a perfect little snapshot of systemic risk. The immediate economic hit is obvious: lost ticket sales, the nightmare of rebooking everyone, moving crews, planes.
Costs a fortune, I bet.
Oh, yeah. The industry already loses something like $100 billion a year just from regular delays, IT outages like that. They add another maybe $10 to $15 billion globally, and stock prices for the affected companies can drop sometimes up to 8%.
Wow. But it's not just one company, is it? You mentioned that global outage.
Exactly. The cascading effect is what's really scary. Remember that 2024 global IT mess? That was traced back to a bad software update from a single cybersecurity firm, CrowdStrike.
Right.
And it knocked out 8.5 million systems worldwide. Banks, airlines, hospitals, you name it. It shows how interconnected and maybe fragile these systems are. One weak link can cause massive disruption.
8.5 million systems. That is a serious wake-up call.
And think long-term. These things erode trust. People rely on these services. Studies show lots of customers just walk away from a brand after a big data breach or outage. For businesses built on loyalty, it's an existential threat.
Okay, 8.5 million systems is staggering. But it does make you wonder, why do these things seem to happen so often? From airline glitches to these massive global meltdowns, it feels constant.
It does feel that way. And it's easy to immediately think, hackers, sophisticated cyber attacks, and those are real threats, absolutely.
No,
But the sources really hammer home a critical point that often gets missed. The human element. The World Economic Forum actually estimates that human error is behind something like 95% of cybersecurity incidents today.
95%, seriously.
Yep, including that huge 2024 global outage we just talked about.
Yeah.
A faulty update pushed out, likely a mistake somewhere in the process.
So it's not always complex hacking. Sometimes it's someone clicking the wrong button.
Yeah.
Or not patching software.
Or inadequate training, bad internal procedures, poor oversight on software updates, things like that. It means that while, yes, we need cutting-edge tech to fight cyber threats, a huge amount of improvement in resilience actually comes from the basics.
Like better training, stronger internal rules.
Exactly. Rigorous patch management, robust controls, stuff designed to catch or prevent those potentially catastrophic human mistakes.
Okay, so let's try and weave all this together. We've got information being weaponized, digital systems proving fragile, media under pressure. How does this all circle back to what's happening domestically in the U.S.? And then what are the global consequences?
Right, let's connect those dots.
Starting with the big one, political polarization. The sources paint a picture of really deep ideological divides, right? Growing hostility fueled by partisan media, nobody trusting the other side.
Absolutely. And the costs are enormous, both socially and economically. You see it in Washington, legislative gridlock. Can't get anything done, fiscal policies get delayed, economic reforms stall.
Which affects everyone's wallet eventually.
For sure. But it goes beyond government. It damages relationships, communities. It even impacts public health. Think about how politicized things like masks or vaccines became during the pandemic.
Yeah, that was intense.
And misinformation is like pouring gasoline on that fire. It
Ah.
twists how people see their political opponents, makes the hostility worse. The sources even mention incorrect voting, people voting against their own apparent interests because they've been fed bad information,
So it creates this loop. Polarization makes you seek out biased news.
which then reinforces your biases, makes you trust the other side even less, and deepens the polarization. It's a vicious cycle, definitely.
And economically, beyond gridlock.
Well, it creates uncertainty. Markets don't like that kind of political instability. It can dampen investment. And when there are big fights over things like the debt ceiling, it can actually make it more expensive for the U.S. government to borrow money.
And there's that really concerning phrase the sources used, autocratic openness.
Yeah, that's worrying. It points to this growing disenchantment with democracy itself, especially among younger Americans and also persons of color, according to the sources. Some people are becoming more open to the idea of, well, less democratic ways of governing.
That is a stark phrase. It suggests a fundamental shift for some people. And in this kind of supercharged, polarized atmosphere, it seems like anything can become political ammunition, right? Even something really minor, like a health issue.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources mentioned Donald Trump's diagnosis of chronic venous insufficiency, CVI, described as, a pretty common vein thing for older adults, generally benign.
Right. Medically, relatively minor in the grand scheme of things for someone his age. But in today's climate, even something like that gets sucked into the political vortex.
Oh.
Opponents might seize on it, try to spin it as something more serious, question fitness for office. Supporters might downplay it excessively or frame any discussion of it as an unfair attack. It just becomes another data point to be fought over through a partisan lens.
Blurring the lines between objective medical fact and political spin.
Exactly. It shows how almost nothing is off limits. Personal health details become just more noise, more grist for the mill, contributing to that overall environment of distrust where objective facts are hard to nail down.
It really feels like nothing can escape the political scrum anymore. It's quite something. So bringing it all together, what does this intense domestic situation mean for America's place in the world?
It means, frankly, a significant erosion of U.S. credibility. And its soft power, its attractiveness, its influence. Take foreign policy. It's much harder to be effective internationally when things are so divided at home.
Because allies don't know if policies will stick.
Precisely. You need Congress on board for a lot of things. Aid, trade deals. Partisan fights can hamstring the U.S.'s ability to act decisively or consistently. You get these big policy swings from one administration to the next.
Making the U.S. look like an unreliable partner.
That's the perception, yeah. Foreign leaders become skeptical about long-term commitments. It strains alliances. And economically, these domestic battles make the U.S. look less like a stable, reliable leader. Plus, if global opinion of the U.S. declines, that can hit trade and investment down the line.
And adversaries must love this, right?
Oh, absolutely. The sources are clear. Countries like Russia and China actively exploit these U.S. political divisions. They use disinformation, they amplify the conflicts online, all to undermine U.S. influence and democratic ideals globally.
So the U.S. is kind of exporting its own dysfunction.
That's a good way to put it. The internal problems serve as a negative example, potentially discouraging democratic movements elsewhere. It weakens the whole case for democracy globally.
Wow. Exporting dysfunction.
That's a powerful and, pretty troubling thought. So how does this specifically hit developing nations? You mentioned they're particularly vulnerable.
They really are in several ways. First, misinformation. They're often highly susceptible, maybe lower levels of digital literacy, less access to diverse, reliable news sources.
So disinformation can spread faster, do more damage.
Exactly. It can twist political debates, stir up violence, deepen existing social divides. Then there's the economic hit. If the U.S. is politically unstable or turns inward, that can mean less foreign aid, less investment.
Which can stall their development.
Absolutely. It can curtail progress on critical projects. And then there's what the sources call the democracy deficit. If the U.S. model looks messy and unstable.
Other countries might think twice about pursuing democracy, or even slide backward. That's the risk. They might be less inclined to start or stick with democratic reforms. You could see democratic backsliding if democracy is perceived as just too chaotic. And finally, think about inequality. Misinformation often hits marginalized groups hardest. Plus, existing digital divides mean they might lose access to essential online services, making things even worse.
Okay, let's try to pull back and see the forest for the trees here. Taking that step back, all these different things we've talked about, the deepfakes, the politicized intel, the media pressures, the IT failures, the polarization, they aren't really separate issues, are they? They're all interconnected.
Completely interconnected. It's a system. Think about it. AI deepfakes fuel the misinformation that erodes trust. That erosion of trust makes political polarization worse because suddenly truth just depends on which side you're on.
And the politicized intelligence feeds right into that distrust of institutions.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the media landscape is fragmenting, partly due to economic pressures, making it harder to find common ground or push back against bad information, which, again, fuels polarization.
And the fragile infrastructure, the IT outages, the human errors, they create these real-world crises, economic damage, security risks.
Which can further shake public confidence. And then, that intense U.S. polarization weakens its standing abroad, creates openings for adversaries, reduces support for developing nations. It all feeds into each other.
So when you put all those pieces together, what's the big picture? The report you mentioned, it suggested this points towards a new kind of global competition.
Yeah, it floats the idea of a sort of digital Cold War, where the fight isn't just about tanks and missiles, but about the integrity of information itself, about the trustworthiness of the digital systems we all rely on. That's the new battlefield.
A digital Cold War.
And maybe the most profound takeaway from all the sources, the deepest implication, is this idea of the systemic erosion of a shared reality.
Meaning?
Meaning with deepfakes making reality malleable, intelligence becoming politicized, media splitting us into echo chambers, we lose consensus on basic facts. People end up living in increasingly separate subjective realities.
And if we can't agree on what's real,
how can we possibly solve complex problems together? Whether it's climate change, pandemics, economic crises, if we don't have a shared understanding of the facts, we're stuck. It's a fundamental threat to, well, to society functioning. It is truly a sobering thought.
that really is sobering. If we lose that shared reality, where do we even begin? Okay, the problems feel huge, maybe even overwhelming, but the sources didn't just diagnose the problems, right? They also pointed towards solutions.
Thankfully, yes, there are actionable things.
So what are the key steps we could take to start rebuilding that information integrity, strengthening democracy's resilience?
Well, first off, AI regulation seems critical. We need strong rules around AI-generated content, things like clear labeling, especially for political ads, transparency about who made it, and holding creators and platforms accountable.
Okay, transparency and accountability for AI. What else?
Digital literacy, big time. We need major public education pushes so people across the board, all ages, all backgrounds, get better at spotting misinformation, understanding how algorithms work,
Especially for vulnerable groups here and in developing countries.
Absolutely crucial. And third, actively working to rebuild trust. That means real bipartisan efforts to depoliticize institutions like intelligence agencies, focus on objective analysis, communicate transparently. It's a long road, but essential.
Makes sense. And what about shoring up that fragile digital infrastructure we talked about, the IT systems?
Number one is investment. Serious public and private money needs to go into strengthening cybersecurity, not just for airlines, but across all critical sectors, power grids, banks, healthcare.
And tackling that human error element, the 95%.
Yes, that's huge. Rigorous, ongoing training for all employees so they can spot phishing scams, understand security protocols, couple that with really strict internal IT policies, strong passwords, regular software patching, controls on who can access what.
And maybe checking on the companies you work with?
Definitely. Mandating regular cybersecurity audits for third-party vendors, anyone in your supply chain. Because, as we saw with that global outage, a vulnerability anywhere can become a vulnerability everywhere.
Right. Okay, final piece then. Against this backdrop of domestic turmoil and eroding trust, how can the U.S. start to rebuild its credibility on the world stage and actually help developing nations navigate this?
It has to start at home, really. Striving for more bipartisanship, more consistency in foreign policy. That's how you rebuild trust with allies, show you're a reliable partner again.
So less policy whiplash between administrations.
Ideally, yes. And rethinking foreign aid. Make sure it's truly supporting sustainable development, meeting core needs, not just serving short-term U.S. interests. Strengthen those strategies.
And working with others globally.
Absolutely essential. Collaborate with international partners, tech companies, civil society groups to fight the global spread of misinformation, especially in developing countries where it can be so destabilizing. Recognize it's a shared threat.
Well, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today, really connecting those dots that on the surface seem so separate. It's become pretty clear that this erosion of truth, the digital fragility, the deep political divides, they aren't just isolated problems.
No, they're symptoms of much deeper systemic issues.
And issues that hit the most vulnerable nations hardest, as you said, undermining their progress, their democratic hopes.
And tackling them really demands, well, everything we've discussed. A renewed focus on truth, on transparency, on making our digital world more resilient, and on engaging consistently and constructively with the rest of the world.
It feels like the future stability, prosperity, not just for the US, but globally, really hinges on rebuilding that trust, finding that shared reality again, and building resilience into our systems.
It does. And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive. In this world where facts themselves seem up for grabs, what's your role? How do you personally navigate this? How do you try to discern what's true and contribute to some kind of shared understanding beyond just passively consuming news?
Yeah, maybe think about your own media diet. Is it reinforcing these echo chambers or is it challenging them? Something definitely worth considering.